victory over Nagash would be short-lived, for soon after the Emperor would face his last and greatest challenge yet. This ancient war has long been forgotten, and none truly know the true extent of the devastation it caused. It was Sigmar's greatest triumph, the great struggle against the armies of the Norsca ever-chosen Morcar the Uniter, of the Talos tribe, who had risen to ascendancy in the eyes of the dark gods as the first of their ultimate champions, charged to establish the mortal realm as the kingdom of chaos, and thirsting for vengeance against Sigmar for destruction of his clansmen during his reprisal raids against the north. Having gathered a great army from amongst the Norse and other races sworn to chaos, the Uniter led his host of warriors south. Little is known of the invasion, but it is clear that it was one of the most earth-shattering in all of the Empire's ancient history. Few of the wars of its modern age can possibly compare to this scale of devastation and destruction. With Morcar's victories, the power of chaos surged from the north, bathing the world in the breath of the dark gods. With such power, the demons of the realm of chaos materialized in the mortal world and marched alongside the ranks of the Norsemen. With each city that fell, Morcar avenged the long dead of his fallen tribe, thirsting only to cross blades with the man who led the charge against them. Eventually, Sigmar rallied the imperial armies and faced Morcar and his Norsai. Once more did the men of the south do battle against the indomitable warriors of the north. In the battle, Sigmar faced the Skull-Taker of Thorn, and dealt a terrible blow upon the thing's vile head that saw it destroyed and banished back to Khorne's halls with a shattered skull. Thus was Azul defeated, for the first and last time, forever carrying the legacy of his humiliation at Sigmar's hand upon his scarred horns. But little was this compared to the titanic duel between Sigmar and Morcar, and the mortal world has never before or since seen the equal of that cataclysmic clash of titans. For a day and a night did Sigmar duel the champion of the northern gods, in a battle likened to that between gods themselves. The fury of their combat did rend apart the sky and split the ground asunder with peals of thunder, strikes of lightning, and raging torrents of fire. The two avatars of the gods matched their arms in such glorious contest. At last they had found their equals on the earth. Regardless, the Ever-Chosen, though he had come closer than all others to ending Sigmar's life, was nonetheless defeated and struck down by the Emperor's mighty hammer. The destruction caused by his first of the great chaos incursions was thus ended with Morcar's downfall, and his staggeringly mighty army was driven back to the north, as disparate and fractured as the skull of Morcar. Finally, at the 50th year of his reign, a great event would occur. In that year, Emperor Sigmar Heldenhammer, greatest of all mankind's rulers, stood up from his throne, placed down his crown, and took up Galmaraz, walking out of the great hall of his capital. He passed Wulfgart and his chosen bodyguard, who were roaring with laughter at some jest or remembrance of times past. He strode down the path towards the market square where folk haggled and bartered with loud voices and much good humour. He passed them, smelling roasting meat and hearing the merrymaking of children playing in the gutters, as he had done in his youth many years before. Down the streets he walked, where men sat and gambled or sparred with one another, and womenfolk talked with babes on their hips or prepared food for the next meal, or having cooked it, ate broth and beans out of earthenware pipkin balanced on their knees. Girls sat in groups, busy over fine embroidery. Sigmar saw life carry on in all its vibrancy as he walked by, unnoticed by all. Out through the iron gate he walked, and down the well-worn track. Carts rumbled past, bringing trade and wealth into the town. On either side the fields were tended by men and women, sowing seeds from baskets hung around their necks. Children ran behind them, beating drums and yelling to frighten off the greedy crows that circled overhead. He saw sheep and goats grazing peacefully, overlooked by shepherds. Then into the forest he plunged, journeying eastward towards the mountains. He passed foresters as they cleared the track of fallen branches and laid traps for game. They carried hunting bows and axes and were accompanied by slavering hounds. But the beasts picked up no scent, and Sigmar passed them, blessing them silently. When he emerged from the forest onto the eastward plain, he was no longer alone. To his left trotted a wild, grey-headed wolf, and to his right there was a giant boar with black tusks. As he set off up the hillside, they followed at his heels faithfully. The wolf with his wildness and courage, the boar with his wits and tenacity. When Sigmar reached the top of the hill, he turned. Before him and sweeping out to the north and west was the forest. Cutting through it in all directions were roads. Every town, village and settlement was connected. Travellers and tradesmen moved like ants over them, spreading news and prosperity wherever they went. Troops of warriors tramped, and cavalry cantered throughout the land, lending the populace protection from danger. Smoke rose high in the sky from the villages, which were burgeoning into towns, which in their turn were growing into cities, and wherever Sigmar looked, he could see the strength of mankind grow. Through him the tribes were united in a common cause. Enemies lurked everywhere, but together men would overcome them. Sigmar looked at what he had forged with his strength, cunning and courage, and he knew his work had come to an end. It was time for others to take up his mantle and forge an indomitable empire. For the land and unity it created was far greater than any one man, any one dynasty. It belonged to the people it had been made for, and it would be guarded by their strength, existing eternally in their minds and souls. They were all his heirs, who would take up the mantle and rule the land in his absence. Raising his mighty hammer in honour of the indomitable spirit of humanity, and in praise of Ulrich, who had in his benevolence granted him victory, Sigmar offered one final goodbye to the people he so loved. He had only one last journey yet to make. Behind him rose the heads of the World's Edge Mountains. He turned to them, and without a backward glance, marched towards his final destiny, and his place, earned through great deeds, unsurpassed courage, and much bloodshed and pain, in the everlasting pantheon of the gods.
Aye, the Empire needs heirs, and you are all my heirs. Everyone who lives in this land is my heir. Everyone who fights and bleeds to protect the Empire, they will be Sigmar's heirs.
By the time of his victory over the orcs at Blackfire Pass, Sigmar was undoubtedly the most revered leader in the history of the Reich Basin, and even before he departed to the east, small shrines were erected to his glory, though not with a view to worship, but rather to simply commemorate him for his successes in defending humanity. The formal cult of Sigmar would not come into being until the 23rd year after Sigmar's departure, in 73 IC, as legends began to arise among the populace of Sigmar returning, when need was dire, to defend his race, or of him watching over his people from beyond the realm of flesh. A wild-eyed friar known as Johann Hellstrom appeared before the masses to relate a vision that he had experienced of Sigmar kneeling before Ulrich, who then placed the crown of godhood upon his brow, in mirror of Sigmar's mortal crowning before the Ulrich, which you may remember from an earlier episode of this saga. Thousands clamoured around this charismatic preacher, for a strong cult of personality was already growing around Sigmar's memory, and hungry were the people for yet more legends of their heroic forebear. As Hellstrom preached that all of the Empire's laws were holy, thus enshrining the Elector Counts with divine authority, his message proved immensely popular with the nobility. In time, the early cult of Sigmar gained a great amount of power and influence due to many high-profile conversions amongst the nobility. By 73 IC, the cult had grown so powerful from the rapid influx of powerful converts and mass support that it was officially recognized by the imperial government as the cult of the empire. This decision was opposed by some of the other more established cults with whom it competed to accept this upstart cult of personality as an equal. They argued that if there was no concrete evidence of Sigmar's divinity, they were under no obligation to accept the validity of his worship. Nonetheless, this ultimately proved irrelevant. The people wanted it, but more importantly, the nobility wanted it. The cult of Sigmar became officially recognized and would grow to permeate every facet of imperial life.